Regular meeting of the Schertz Planning and Zoning Commission. Before we get started here, I'd just like to thank Commissioner Bro for filling in for me at the last meeting, and for the rest of you being here to pick up my slack. I appreciate that. Also tonight we welcome Mr. McMaster as a full-time member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and Ms. Craig was moved up to alternate number 1, so we do have a vacancy for an alternate. If anybody is interested, just contact the city secretary. All right, so seating alternate to active required is not required this evening. Item number 3 is hearing of residents. This time is set aside for any person who wishes to address the Planning and Zoning Commission. Each person should fill out the speaker's register prior to the meeting. Presentation should be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Discussion by the commission of any item not on the agenda shall be limited to statements of specific factual information given in response to any inquiry, a recitation of existing policy in response to an inquiry, and or a proposal to place the item on a future agenda. The presiding officer during the hearing of residents portion of the agenda will call on those persons who have signed up to speak in the order they have registered. All right, so also on the agenda tonight is a public hearing. Well, actually, I think we have 3. But Mr. Del Toro, you've signed up, I think, for to speak about, you want to talk about 5B, the rezone request. So the way it works, because you've signed up, you have a choice. You can have 3 minutes now and speak again during the public hearing, or you can waive this for now and speak during the public hearing. It's your choice. So John Del Toro signed up. Would you like to speak now, sir? Oh. Okay. All right, thank you, sir. Item number 4 is our consent agenda. We have a single item on there. 4A is minutes from the January 31st, 2024 special meeting. Commissioner's I was not present. Do we need to pull this for corrections or comments? If not, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Also move.
Second.
All right, we've got Commissioner McMaster and Commissioner Goldick. A motion and a second. There's no discussion on consent agenda. Please record your votes. All right, I have 7 votes. If you'd publish that, please. All right, we have 7 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. All right. Losing all my paperwork here. Moving on, item 5 is public hearing. As I said, we have 3 of them tonight. Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing related to zone change requests, specific use permit requests, and Unified Development Code amendments within this agenda. The public hearing will be open to receive a report from staff, the applicant, the adjoining property owners affected by the applicant's request, and any other interested persons. Upon completion, the public hearing will be closed. The commission will discuss and consider the application and may request additional information from staff or the applicant if required. After deliberation, the commission is asked to consider and act upon the following requests and make a recommendation to the City Council if necessary. Item number 5A is our Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee meeting number 4. Who's going to start us off with that?
Good evening to the Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Shad Como Friesen Nichols. So tonight what we'd like to do is to give you a presentation overview, if you will, of the comprehensive plan document. So we'll go through a few things, and then after the public hearing we'll be able to entertain any questions. So just kind of give you an overview of our timeline. So almost a year ago, we started this process that we kicked off in March doing a tour of the community. and kickoff meeting. We met with you. Tonight is the fourth meeting with the CPAC committee. If you recall, the scope of this work was initially started out as looking at 4 areas within your city to look at the future land use, update to your previous comprehensive plan. So what we did was we met with you, of course, on these several occasions. We had a public survey that went out, which we received 409 responses, which is a good number. And it was an interactive survey where we were able to do a survey, get input, but also it had an interactive map on there. And that interactive map allowed people to be able to put comments, pin drops, if you will, in different areas of the community to give specific information. There was also a community event during the Halloween season at the Dunkin' Pumpkin, if I recall. I don't know if I switched to event, so we got information from the citizens as well from that. And we also had some focus groups also. Those focus groups involve developers. We met with different other organizations that might not necessarily been in the community, but associated with the community as well. And if you look at the right side of the screen there, these are the themes that came out of the input that we received. So safe neighborhoods, the retails and restaurants and entertainment, the increasing of that, responsible growth. So how do you grow responsibly, which is a big part of this plan, and then diverse housing options, and then flood control. So I'll come back up in a few, but I'll let Caitlin go through the document review.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you again for having us. So I'm just going to quickly run through what is in the document. You've had this document for a few weeks now, so hopefully you've looked over it. So I'm not going to go into a ton of detail just for the sake of time, but we're just going to run through kind of the major pieces of the document. And like Shad said, after public comment, we can come back up and dig into anything deeper that you would like to. So the document begins with our typical community snapshot. So this is where we're looking at things like your existing planning context. So that's your existing plans. What kind of frameworks are we working within the city of Schertz? Looks at your community demographics, physical features, market and economic market snapshot, and then it starts to identify strengths, weaknesses, challenges, and opportunities that this plan should be considering as it moves forward. Generally, the most telling piece of our snapshots are what you see on the right side of the screen here, which is your population growth projections. So for the city of Schertz, you're looking at potentially a population reaching up into the 6 digits sometime between the year 2060 and 2070. So that feels very far out, but that's exactly what we're trying to think about here, is what can you be doing now to set yourself up for success in that long-term planning horizon. The document then lays out some policy statements. So these are, you don't have to read everything on there, but they're in your plan versions as well. But what this really does is this allows you to have a decision-making tool. This summarizes some of the things we heard, the vision of the community about what they want for Schertz related to all these different topics. So development, transportation, Main Street, green spaces, development practices, stakeholders, and economic diversity. So we cannot plan for everything, every possible scenario you might face as a city in the next 20 to 30 years, but what we can do is lay out these policy statements that allow you, when you're making decisions that maybe aren't specifically spelled out in this plan, this is what you can refer back to help guide your decision making. So Shad mentioned the focus areas. We started with 4 focus areas. Number 3 and number 5 were combined into one. Originally, we went ahead and separated those for the final document just because they are so different. So the same recommendations didn't really fit for both of those. So we ended up with 5 focus areas. And the idea of these focus areas was that these were the areas that the city really saw the opportunity for future growth. So this is where a lot of the change is going to be happening. This is where the planning needs to be happening. This is where we need to look forward and make sure we know what we want to come to these areas. So each of these areas in the document has a profile in the document that looks at existing conditions, proposed kind of land use and character, what is the vision or intent for that area, and then some initial recommendations. The land use input specifically, Shad mentioned kind of the general community engagement themes that we heard and takeaways that we had, but this spread here is the specific land use input that we really thought about as we were creating your future land use map. So safe neighborhoods was the top priority for your residents. There was a lot about transportation and different multimodal networks, sidewalks, accommodating bicycles, trail networks, those kind of things. Some of the missing goods or services that people would like to see more of within the city, including restaurants, entertainment, and food access. And this was actually a very staggering statistic, but almost 80% of the residents thought that the biggest thing that we can do in Schertz to help people prosper here is to support local businesses and entrepreneurs. There are a couple topics of interest in the land use map chapter that we thought were just important things for the city of Schertz to be thinking about as you think about land use here in Schertz. So number one is complete communities. And this is just the idea that people can get all of their basic needs met within a short either drive or walk or bike of their home. So they're not having to drive 45 minutes to get medical care. They're not having to drive 30 minutes to access healthy groceries. So this idea of complete communities that adds just a little bit of those goods and services closer to people's homes. And this is really applicable mostly if you're looking at your land use map in the Main Street complete neighborhoods and mixed use centers. So that's where we imagine this complete communities idea could really thrive. And then second, you heard Shad mention that one of the themes of the community engagement was flooding. And so we also put in some guidance in there about innovative stormwater management and green infrastructure, along with just generally making sure your utilities are right-sized for your community and your growth, which wasn't a topic that we were covering within this land use update. But we wanted to also put out there the thought of these other alternatives that can be paired with what we call the gray infrastructure, and to really make a dent in especially things like localized flooding, water quality. These kind of strategies can really help with that. So going on to the future land use map, we're going to come back to Shad and dig into this a little bit more specifically. But this is really the meat of the plan. And so you've seen multiple iterations of this over the last year. So this is where we have landed at this point. I think one thing that's really important to remember is that a future land use map is not zoning. So zoning is separate from this exercise. A future land use map can inform zoning updates, but this is a guidance document, it is a visionary document, it is not regulatory in any way. Like, no one can be forced to do any of these things. So this is really just kind of setting that bigger vision and future intent for your city. So I think that's really important to note when we talk here tonight. And what we were really trying to do with this was, A, simplify your land use plan. Right now, it has a lot more categories than this version has, which makes it really hard to use, both for your city staff as well as for the public or the private sector. It just makes it confusing and hard to understand. So our initial goal was to simplify and then add flexibility, again, both for city staff and for the private sector. So what you'll notice is maybe different in this is that there's fewer categories, and the categories under each category have more types of development allowed. So that's where you get into some of the dashboards, which we'll talk about in a second. But so really that simplification and the flexibility, those were the two big things we were really trying to go for. And then with that simplification of categories, the new categories no longer matched your existing categories. So we expanded beyond the boundaries of those 5 focus areas that we were initially looking at and tried to translate, I guess, existing land use categories into the most applicable of the new land use categories. Therefore, the entire map, you didn't have 2 maps, basically. You have one kind of holistic map that can be used together versus having an old map and then parts of your city using a new map. Our transportation engineers took a look at your transportation networks as well as your already proposed, not your proposed, but your existing thoroughfare plan where you've already made some initial decisions about where future roadways might happen. They look at our land use map and look at where the growth that we're proposing happens, and they kind of marry those two. And so what their findings were is they thought the future thoroughfare plan that you guys already have in Schertz is pretty good. It's should be adequate for most of the growth that's being shown in the land use map. Potentially focus areas 1 and 5, so that southeast part of the city, and then north of the highway up north of I-35, that those maybe, as those start building out, might be places where the city will need to make sure that there's adequate transportation networks in those 2 areas, because those are maybe the 2 that might be a little sparse. And then finally, this chapter ends with some fiscal impacts. So you met Jason Clonch a couple times. He came and spoke to you. And so Catalyst did the number crunching for our market and fiscal impacts. And so they came up with, you'll see the $2.1 billion of net new fiscal benefits. I think that's supposed to be 30-year plan horizon. Is that correct? So that's a typo. The $2 billion in 3 years. Congratulations. No, that's supposed to be 30 years. And so you'll see on the right the chart that just shows, based on the land use plan, how much more development of each of those different development types those are the capacities. I think that's really important to note. Those are like full build-out capacities. If you built out every color on that land use map to its full capacity, this is what it would handle. That is probably not going to happen, and if it does, it will be very far down the line. It's really just about, people always ask, well, how long is that going to take to get there? And that's really a matter of the market. So, nothing in this plan really says a certain amount has to happen by a certain time period. This is just a full build-out capacity that you could potentially realize in Schertz based on this future land use plan. And then the whole document ends with an implementation section. This is just a snippet of the first couple action items, just to give you an idea of how these are laid out. So we have a series of, it's approximately, I think, 30 action items that we've identified for the city to undertake to implement the vision of this plan, and includes timelines, people who should be working on it, or groups who kind of leads or champions that action. And then what are the expected benefits and outcomes? Why are we recommending this action? What is the point of this action? Here's what you should expect if that action is implemented. It also gives a little bit of best practice guidance about using the document, how to make decisions, again, that aren't maybe fully formed within the document itself. And this includes things like updating the plan every so often, doing trainings for city staff, community members, elected bodies, appointed bodies. So just some general guidance on best practices on kind of how to roll this out and keep it updated. So with that, I'm going to let Shad jump back into the future land use plan.
So as Caitlin mentioned, at the beginning of the process, there were, I can't remember the exact number, but it was at least 13 or 12 to 13 future land use categories. And so it made the future land use plan a little bit complex. And so what you want in the future land use plan, you want it to be more of a vision and guidance. And so we reduced those to these 9 categories. So we'll kind of go section by section. So the northern part of the community, you'll see the focus areas outlined, but along 35 regional corridor. So that allows for things that you typically see now that are developing there. And in the document also, we have descriptions of each one of these categories to kind of give you an idea of what's there. One thing to note is in the focus area 3 is the current quarry facility that's there now. So what we did is we called that a deferment area, development deferment. So what we're saying is, and I know the question was on the table in the beginning of the process, do we let this ETJ go or do we keep it within the city? There's pros and cons, of course, to doing both of them. By calling it development deferment, what we're saying is kind of allow it to see, let it see what's going to happen down the road. You know, is it going to remain a quarry? Is there a potential in the future to be able to do something? So maybe not let it go now, and you still may make that decision to let it go in the future, but maybe not make that decision at this point in time to see what might happen. There are cases in other areas where there's opportunity to redevelop this area. So that's what we kind of set that aside for. But for the most part, this area, mainly industrial, as it's developing now, so that kind of remains, and of course your regional corridor allowing that to be. The complete neighborhood, what that category is, allows you flexibility. So it allows for a variety of housing options, as we saw in the input that we received from the community. It allows for the more connectivity, walkability in those areas. It could be single family, it could be your townhomes. It just allows flexibility of housing options. And you'll see that also in some of the other areas of the city. Also, as Caitlin mentioned, so we were originally tasked with looking at those focus areas, but once we start condensing the future land use plan, we had to bring everything into accordance. And so for the most part, we just kind of made things fit the way they currently were in the future land use plan for the middle portion of the city. And so you'll see just a mix of your local corridor, which is your neighborhood commercial retail land uses, the complete neighborhood, which for the most part in this area are your single family homes and some public uses as well. And then the southern portion, the regional corridor along I-10, I think everybody's probably in agreement that, with the construction along I-10 and things that are happening there, that you want to be able to allow for those commercial retail opportunities, maybe some big box. One of the things that we heard in the input was, people that are living in this southern portion of Schertz having the opportunity to be able to have something that's closer for them to frequent versus having to go to 35 to get some of those things done. So we kind of see that I-10 corridor developing similar to what's happening on 35. Another thing that was clear was also that, Schertz has this rural character to it, and making sure that that's still maintained for the most part. And of course, that's mostly being dictated also by the base as well. And so you'll see that area number 2 remaining the rural kind of living category, as you will. And that's not to say that this rural living and the larger lot sizes can't be translated into, say, for instance, area number 1 as well. But this is just making sure that the low density is in the correct place here, contingent to the base, adjacent to the base. And then there's opportunity also for some industrial in the southern portion as well. So we'll come back doing question and comments, and we could talk a little bit more specifics about the future land use plan. In terms of the next steps, If there's any necessary revisions to the document, we'll go back and make those revisions. And then the next step would be, this commission making an approval for this to go forward to be heard by City Council, and then at that time, being heard for adoption.
All right, get organized here again. This is a public hearing. It is now 5:55 p.m. And I will open the session for public comment. Anyone wishing to address the commission on this subject is welcome to step forward. No one. Nobody. All righty. Okay, so it's still 5:55 and the public input portion of this hearing is closed. All right, commissioners, comments, questions? Well, I'll say I was hoping for a little more detail in your briefing, particularly, and maybe we can, if you have them, we can throw them up on the screen, are the definitions of these land use, for instance, complete neighborhood and mixed-use center, I think are the ones that are they're probably, were they in our packet, Sam? I mean, I thought I read them, but.
They were I believe they were in the packet, but let's see I think they have a presentation that we can potentially pull up.
I mean, I was just hoping that.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure they are, but, again, how many pages? This says,
That's
just.
on page 64 of the full comprehensive plan document. Starts on page 64.
Well, let's see, I think Sam's going to find them for us here.
Yeah.
So.
Here we go.
Yep.
All right, here we go. We'll start with Main Street here.
Specifically.
I mean, some of them are fair, like Main Street's fairly obvious, rural living is obvious, but complete neighborhoods, yeah. So my issue is that I'm not sure we've gone in the right direction. I understand that we had 13 categories before, now we only have 9. I'm not sure that was the right direction to go. Basically what we've done is we've taken this yellowish orange paintbrush and just brushed southern Schertz and parts of northern Schertz. And, in terms of the chairman of planning and zoning, I'm not sure how helpful that is to me in the future in making decisions, because what we've seen developing in southern Schertz is they want to build single-family residences. And we struggled with the old mixed-use neighborhood in the old land use plan. Sure, mixed use included single-family. Well, that's all the developer was interested in. There was nothing to force anybody to build mixed use. Everybody wants to build houses. Well, some want to build apartments. So part of me looks at your new land use map and all I see are houses now. No surprise there, because that's what, we go back to talking about market driven, and I'm going to pull out my stump again. Who's driving this ship? The city or the developers? Okay. Right now I feel like the tail is wagging the dog, not the other way around. I gave it some more thought after thinking of those comments, because I did read through it. And maybe the better way is to outline where we'd like to see. And for instance, when you look at the difference between Schertz north of, well, north of, say, 78, but really north of along I-35, and you compare that to what's south of 78, and I see a lot of industrial, commercial, I see retail, and yet when I go down to Schertz, all I see is this one red band along I-10, and then a little hodgepodge. I think we've probably we've already lost control over 1518 with Crossvine. Because where I'm thinking is maybe we should be looking at a couple more of these corridors like 1518, maybe even Lower Seguin Road. What do we want those to be? Do we want them to be not residential collectors? What is Schertz Parkway? Secondary?
It's showing it as local collector.
Yeah.
Local
Or
collector,
local
okay.
corridor, sorry, local corridor.
But, where I'm going is, do we want to think more about where would we like, where do we want to see the general business, the neighborhood services? And then the rest of it, we leave as complete neighborhood. But again, I think, I honestly don't remember. Is there frontage? Crossvine doesn't go all the way. Crossvine is set back from 1518, correct? Or
That's,
no?
yeah,
All
it's
right. So
right.
it's like up here on Church Parkway where they're right on the. Okay.
So that's what we're kind of here tonight to sort of hash out, right? If we think that we need some adjustments to this map, I mean, this is what we're here to do, right? So, for instance, your Lower Seguin comment, if we envision that Lower Seguin could be another major thoroughfare with potential commercial activity on it, then maybe we should, accommodate for that in this future land use map. We have a specific category called local corridor, which I believe is this one right here.
All right.
And that is sort of what we're envisioning with that is what we're seeing along FM 3009. It's not I-35 big box stores. It's more, mom and pop style places, and so that's why we decided for local corridor along. You'll see it here on FM 3009, but also down 1518.
Okay.
So if I think Lower Seguin, it's very reasonable to assume that could potentially be Lower Seguin as well, and then there might be another corridor in here that we think that could work too. And that's why we're here to kind of talk about it.
Yeah, and I certainly agree with it. I think that's where I'm trying to go with this. And, I can see, my son lives he's right on the edge of Georgetown, I think, right there between Round Rock and Georgetown. And you drive that area up there, and there's a lot of growth and a lot of development, but you see a lot of 5-lane roadways with nothing on them. They're just, somebody thought far enough ahead. I don't know how they paid for them. I'm sure somebody's paying for it. But because I could see Lower Seguin Road being an FM 3009 from 1604 all the way through Schertz, across the creek through Cibolo. But of course, we don't control what Cibolo does. We don't control what Converse does. So, and then the other note I made was about if the plan thinks we need those additional thoroughfares on our master thoroughfare plan, we better jump on that, because I'm not even sure what the status of our master thoroughfare plan is with what the legislature did to us this last session.
Yeah, it makes it tough.
Whether that's still a viable thing or not. Hopefully somebody's trying to figure out how we can keep that.
What we're finding is that a lot of developers are still willing to build a lot of that because it does service their development.
Sure, and as long as we can, and I see that, I agree with you. Yeah, it's, and because we just saw somebody do that. up on, off of 35 where they maintain, where they didn't do the roadway, but they at least dedicated the right-of-way, which they didn't have to do either, so. Ryan, you want to jump in here?
Sorry, thanks. And one, I guess, is sort of your last point. I wouldn't necessarily think about as much with regard to our ultimate planning of the thoroughfare plan, the limitation that the state imposed, right? Because we've always had challenges, whatever they were, of bringing those about to fruition and when that happens and kind of how that happens. But unless it goes to the point that it's not realistic to think that that will ever occur, right? And so we're making a plan based on something that's not likely to happen. I wouldn't think of it that way. I think, as Sam sort of said, we're getting right-of-way dedication. The language the state passed is very specific, so that we have some ideas of how we can deal with that and still get right-of-way dedication and even impose right-of-way dedication on the plan. There are other tools that we have that we can sort of sweeten the pot with, how we use our roadway impact fees essentially and give greater credit for right-of-way dedication, for example, right? So it really benefits them to dedicate that right-of-way. So I wouldn't tend to think of that. What I will say, though, with regard to the other corridors is, so Lower Seguin Road is a secondary arterial on our thoroughfare plan. And keep in mind that the half of it west of 1518, as it kind of runs through Randolph, is clearly in the APZ, and that's going to limit development on there. But it certainly serves as a corridor for vehicles traveling, and when you get east, we certainly have that population that's planned either in Schertz or over in Cibolo to warrant some of that. But again, what I would say, just as we talk about it, Lower Seguin Road on the thoroughfare plan is not at all like a 3009. It's not a primary arterial. As a comparison, Wiederstein, that's a secondary arterial. So I think it's reasonable to assume we will get some non-residential development on it, but it's likely, in my opinion, and Chad and folks can chime in, it's either more to sort of be that neighborhood type of uses. So again, daycares, some professional office type things like that, a coffee shop, right? Or some things that pick up on the pass-through trips. Again, much like we saw with the SUP at Schaefer, you may get a smaller kind of off-brand gas station convenience store like we've got up here, even at Live Oak and Schertz Parkway, as opposed to a QT sort of coming in. And so, as I understand it, the plan allows for that. That's kind of the problem we've had is we didn't want to get so specific on the plan and say this particular parcel will be this particular land use, which, as Shad kind of mentioned, corresponds to a particular zoning district. What we want to do, and in some ways, I think they're thinking you guys are up to the challenge in saying, we're going to lay out this plan that describes this area and describe when things are appropriate and when they're not, and then you're going to have to make a judgment call on it. And the plan gives you the basis to do it because it talks about those goals, talks about what we want to achieve on those when it kind of comes forward. So the only caution I would have is that, and this goes back to maybe the initial comment about feeling that the private sector is driving development. And my answer to that would be, the private sector is driving development. The city of Schertz, we don't build things. We build fire stations maybe, right?
Right.
We build parks, but beyond that, the city doesn't build anything. You have folks here tonight who are here about wanting to build something, right? The private sector is stepping in and sort of saying that. And so I think it's important to remember that every community, the private sector is really what makes that initial determination in their minds of when something is viable where it is. Now, to your point, it's up to the city to say, is that appropriate for our community and what we want it to be? But what I would caution on is we cannot fit a square peg into a round hole. And as much as we may want a certain type of development to come along in a certain area, we certainly would love to have a Cracker Barrel. How many times have we heard that? City doesn't build a Cracker Barrel. It's about our demographics, where they build everything else like that. And so really, I think what I would say is it's about managing what the private sector says is viable for us to say, is that a good fit for the community we want to be? And as you know, sometimes the answer is no. That's not the kind of project that's a fit for our community. Or often what it is, yeah, that seems like a good project, just not there, right? How many times have we run into that where it would be a good project, but not there? And sometimes part of what it is just saying no to what happens to be their first choice, and they move to a second or third choice, which we're good with, and say, great. And sometimes they say, well, we're just going to move on. And that's okay too, but I think it is important to understand that our plan has to, in my mind, because of what our community wants, be based in the reality of what the private sector will build. Otherwise, nothing will happen at all, and likely with where the legislature is going, it will cause them to seek other avenues. And so I agree with you that we need to drive the vision of our community forward, but that vision needs to be based on the reality of the market, because if it's not, nobody's going to build anything, is my thought.
Well, yeah, I don't necessarily.
But I don't know that I disagree with you.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, Brian, but kind of where I'm coming from is, we had a lot of southern Schertz designated for rural estate, and I mean, that's the way the original plan is, what the people wanted.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden we get the developers coming in saying, well, nobody's buying those. They're only buying single family, and we want you to amend your land use plan. Well, what if we'd said no? What harm would it have done to the city if we had said no and stuck to a state neighborhood out there?
Yeah, no, and let me sort of take what you said, because again, I don't think you and I disagree entirely on that. Our plan previously for that rural estate was based on the feedback we got from the property owners. And those property owners said, the vision that we have for this part of our community, as the owners of the property, as the one who drive development, is rural estate. And so what we had is that private side, consistent with our vision, and all was good. And all was good for about 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it was. Time flies and time drags. And then what happened is those stakeholders changed their position. And they changed their position because people came and offered them a lot of money. Part of it was they aged, and what was viable at the time wasn't viable anymore. And so I think the problem that we had on this is that we were slow to develop a plan for it. We dealt with it piecemeal, and I think the commission expressed frustration of, we don't have a plan anymore, we need to update the plan, right? And you guys are right. And so the idea is update the plan, and I think the challenge then here is, what do we want the vision for that area to be? To my knowledge, other than Dr. Pinshorn, we haven't had anybody show up and say, I want to maintain this area as rural estate. And we continue to get development applications. And so what I would say for the commission is, knowing that that's what the market is doing, how do we have that fit with our vision? And one of the questions I would have is, how is what we're seeing and proposing here for Southern Schertz really different than what we have for Central Schertz? To me, it looks really similar, what we're trying to achieve. We're building in that flexibility for the major corridors. We're allowing that residential to occur. Because frankly, you don't hear people grousing about Central Schertz and what's developed. They seem to like it. Many of you live there. You're having businesses there. Where we have this rub are the developing areas that I would expect, and Commissioner Outlaw may remember this, and I would bet if Commissioner Greenwald were still with us, he would say, oh, we had the same things back when Sam was maybe not born yet even, was in high school, with those development pressures and challenges. And so I think that's a little bit of where our struggle is on the one hand, you guys and staff keep hearing from residents who are here who sort of have this mindset, a little bit of, we've arrived, sort of shut the door. And I think there's some skepticism of what would you want to have developed there, that there's really anything they would want to have developed. And I would bet if you went back to P&Z meetings from 40, 50 years ago, those are the same sort of things we heard when Jonas Woods came in and things like that. And so I would keep that in mind as a guide. But I don't think you and I think radically different. My question would be is what on this plan is not consistent with our vision? And as Sam said, what do we need to tweak and make adjustments? And if the commission says, look, we want to make sure we ensure a certain level of retail commercial kind of coming in because that tends to come in slow, and we'd rather hang on to a few parcels rather than let them go, then we can go back and we can work that in and bulk that up. That's, as Sam said, what you guys are here for.
And that's sort of where I started with.
Yeah.
And based on some of the discussion, I think part of my issue is it's difficult with these large-scale maps to see some of the details, but it sounds like we've given thought to, with the local corridor concept of, as I say, protecting the frontage on some of these major thoroughfares to allow for neighborhood services and things like that. The other thing to remember about me is when Chief Friesenhahn was here, I came in one morning and there was a little paperback book on my desk and it said, "Somebody move my cheese."
Yep.
Okay, and it was all about accommodating change, and he felt that I needed to read that book. And so, give you an idea where I come from. I don't, yeah. So,
No, I think,
I did,
and
yeah.
let me say one last thing, and they
and it's
can
a good
correct me
book, by the way.
if I'm wrong. You know, I think some of the struggles you're going to have on that issue is with those, for example, the mixed-use center. And to what degree is what they are proposing consistent with that, or is it moving too far off that? And it's gonna have to be a judgment call, right? And you almost, like the Supreme Court, I'll know it when I see it. And you'll see how it develops and where it ends up. I mean, I think that's the challenge. And so the good news is I think they're trying to build in some of this flexibility to get what you want. And there are going to be those times where I think the toughest thing, we talk about this, is telling someone no. And telling someone no on a good project that's just not in the right spot.
Yeah, I think our future battles are not going to be over the land use itself, but the development plans, the PDDs, and how much do we, I think that's what's coming down the road rather than whether it's single family or duplex, so.
And I will tell you this, having been at the council retreat on Friday, which was a publicly posted meeting and folks could have shown up, council had that debate. There was a time before lunch where that exact question of what do we want our community to be like with regard to residential development was this issue that where it got, everybody got passionate, I would say, trying to talk about that. And so I think that's the stuff that the plan that they've built and staff's worked on provides that flexibility that we don't need a whole new plan as we work through some of these development standard issues as to what is that appropriate lot size mix, right? What are some of those development standards with setback? I think the plan allows us to kind of move those things up and down as we see development happen. And so the good news about fast growth, and Chad will remember this, having been up in McKinney with me way back, is we could clearly see over the course of a year how our development regulations were coming to fruition. And so we could clearly look and say, that's not the right mix. We need to make adjustments to things. It's a little bit slower here, which is a bit of an advantage, but I think the plan still allows for that. So to me, again, the benefit of this plan, which I like, is it allows that flexibility as we debate about what those development standards are, what those lot size mixes are, it fits within this.
Well, I'm sorry I missed that meeting, but I'm beginning to feel like somebody is peeking at my vacation schedule and scheduling these things while where was I Friday? I was somewhere between Cozumel and Galveston, so.
Yeah, and I think it's a hard thing. I think it's one where we're not going to have some light bulb go off going, we found the perfect answer. We'll settle on something saying, this seems like the best thing to try. And much like everything, who be my cheese, it'll work for a while, and then we'll start going, that's a little bit out of whack. We need to revisit it, and we need to adjust.
Well, okay, so we can move on. Basically, my concern, and it sounds like you've at least looked at it, and maybe you just want to take one more look, is this local corridor. Did we put them in the right place, or there's other places we might want to put them? I think would be my input at this point.
And what
So,
might be helpful, if I may, now come on up, is if you can offer the names of streets and say, these are the areas, and then that lets us know where you're
well,
thinking.
yeah, sure.
We
It's
can go take a look at it.
it's like 1518, and that's only a secondary arterial. 1518 is not a primary.
Lower Seguin Road.
Oh, Lower Seguin.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Secondary. Yeah,
Right.
1518 is going to be more like a Schertz Park.
Gotcha.
3009.
Gotcha.
It's Lower Seguin.
So, again, to answer, I think, just take one more look at 1518 and then consider both
It's main corridor here.
Lower Seguin and I don't even, well, Trainer Hale. Yeah, I don't know if Schaefer is worth looking at or not, but just some of those.
Schaefer, got it.
And I wouldn't expect Lower Seguin to be a 3009 because it's not. Looking at your map that you've given me tonight, it looks like you've kind of gotten the intersections covered there where they cross 1518. I see, if I can interpret the colors right, it looks like mixed use center and public use, and then pink running down is the local corridor. So, it may be that just doing the intersections along 1518, that might be sufficient.
I did want to note as well, some of your handouts are actually the zoom-ins of the land use map. If you're having trouble looking at the colors, you'd mentioned that at this scale, it's kind of hard to see. So some of your handouts are zoom-ins of 3 different parentheses, so hopefully that's helpful.
So, somebody else? John, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm a little naiveness, so help me out here. So that little blue hub at the top there next to the train, is that the transportation hub or the
Yeah, so
mixed
actually,
use center?
this right here, and this is something we actually wanted to bring to y'all to discuss as well.
Okay.
Staff has kind of internally had some debates as to, whether or not we see this developing as a true mixed-use center. How likely is this rail, the Lone Star Rail District going to happen? Do we want to leave it in there, as a potential and just, hope that it comes, or do we want to see something else there? So I think we know we've had discussions with EDC, and we know that a lot of this over here is being pitched for industrial projects. And even right here, we have some coming in. So we might see this mixed use actually move from the west side of FM 2252. But this little kind of triangular shape here, that's where we had locked down an area to say, all right, well, if we want to do this rail stop is going to actually happen, this is where we think it might occur. And my question to the committee here is, how do we want that? Do we see that as likely?
Yes.
Okay. And anyone else?
Well, and it could be, you reserve that, we mark it blue in the land use plan, and
I
it
think
might turn out to be a good spot for softball fields or soccer fields or something.
if you looked at our economic growth and our growth as far as our demographics, with over 100,000 people here in the next 30 years, people all can't drive.
Right.
And so if we don't look at other modes of transportation, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And so when people are going to work further and distances, if you give them the opportunity to ride the train, nobody wants to sit in traffic. Just go to I-35 right now.
Right.
I had a couple extra questions after
Go for
that. When we finish this plan, is this plan available to the developers to look at as if I'm going to develop in Schertz, I go grab this plan because I know this is what they want? And so is that available like an encyclopedia on the shelf for them to pull?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. How often is this plan scheduled to be updated, or is it a living document that is constantly updated?
Both. So really, we should look at it every 5-10 years to make sure that it's following our community vision. And then also, there is still opportunity to make amendments to it if we feel that it's necessary. Those are separate applications. We bring it before the Planning and Zoning Commission. So those are decided on a case-by-case basis. So, but in general, we want to look at this every 5 to 10 years to make sure that we're matching the vision, the
Or if
direction.
something grand happens, then you feel like there's a course correction, correct?
And that's, specifically for the development deferment area, this place in green. Let's say the quarry goes out of business tomorrow. It won't, but let's say it does.
Runs out of rock.
Yeah, and then, some new developer comes in and says, hey, I want to buy this whole thing and turn it into some awesome thing. Well, we'd have to go in there and we'd have to make a comp plan amendment for that. So that's just one example.
Tracking.
Yeah.
Last thing, and this is a comment, I think Mr. Outlaw talked about it, that move the cheese thing. Sometimes we take some of the stuff that happens where we live and where we work personally. And I think when we sit on this council, we have to look at it as, is this in the best interest of our kids or our grandkids? And going forward, because your plan went out to 70? Yeah.
We looked at the population out to 70. Surprising this is intended to be about.
Most of us probably won't be here. And if we are, somebody's gonna be looking after us. And so bottom line is that we have to do what's in the best interest for the generations after us, not for us. And it can't be personal. So, thank you.
Where's the train station again? The little point to it again.
Yeah, the blue is public uses, so that's actually that school.
Yeah,
Okay,
That
that's the
little blue
school.
square, that's the school.
All right.
yeah,
That
this,
pink triangle.
Yeah, there's more.
the Union Pacific route runs right on the north of this, which is.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be on that hilltop further west, but I guess not.
The current, what's in the comp plan now has the train station
Right.
over here.
That's what I thought.
And right now, that, like I said before, EDC is really selling a lot of this land as industrial. So if that's the direction, if that's what they're going with, that's why we thought this is there's not a lot of activity over here, so that's why we thought this would be a good location.
Just a side note, if they do get passenger travel on that track system up there, the trains coming through Schertz on 78 are going to double or triple. So you think it's bad now on 78, it'll get 2 or 3 times worse. But that's just a little side note.
78 is also the Sunset Route. That's how you get to Houston from San Antonio. Just saying.
Can you move the map to the southern sector? I'm not sure how to do this, but I still think we need, especially on Lower Seguin and Trainer Hale, I think we need to team up and tie ourselves to Cibolo and come together with Cibolo and go, okay, let's do something together here. Because if all we do is build houses on the west side of the creek and Cibolo builds commercial on the east side of the creek, we've lost. In my opinion, we've lost big. And so I would like to see some sort of, local corridor or something on Lower Seguin and Trainer Hale. Trainer Hale would have to be extended, but with all the growth that's going to happen in the south and all the growth that's going to happen in Cibolo, and it's going to start almost immediately, I think we need to team together and tie ourselves to Cibolo and go, what are you guys doing? What do you suggest? Let's come together on Lower Seguin and Trainer Hale. And what I'm worried about is a very different thing. There's going to be amusement parks on one side and houses on the other, when we could blend them together and support one another instead of just going out independently. So I don't know how you guys do that as a city, but I would like to see it done somehow.
So one thing is that Cibolo is also
Mhm.
Might be a good time to kind of reach out.
Yep. I think we need to, and if we need to put, would it be a good idea to put local connector on Lower Seguin and Trainer Hill? And maybe extend Trainer Hill to the east more. We're gonna need east-west connectivity between us and Cibolo. Just look at 1518, and there's no way to get to Universal City. No way whatsoever. And you could easily put 2 crossings on between us and Universal City on 1518 to their side. But we're long past that. We missed that boat a long time ago. We can still catch the boat on our lower sector, southern sector. I think we need to look at that. And especially since we're, between Schertz and Cibolo, we're working out our conflicts with wastewater and water. Once it becomes public that water and wastewater, the problem is solved in Cibolo and Schertz, that place is gonna blow up. And I think we need to get ready for that.
Okay.
And the only way to get ready for that is, I think, to team up with Cibolo and at least find out what they're trying to do. And because we teamed up with Cibolo on wastewater, and we may be teaming up with Cibolo on water, so there's other avenues that we can team up with Cibolo on.
Okay.
I might have something else, but I'm gonna have to find it.
Sure.
So, anybody?
So if we move that mixed use little square at the top, are we planning on moving that or changing it to something else if we're using it for the train or the rail system?
Yeah, one potential option we could do is we could move the regional corridor category up there. Now that would support some of the same activities, but not exactly the same. For instance, like multifamily development is permitted in both of them. But I think when it comes to like forming, what we're really looking for in terms of character for the mixed use is like a little town center kind of situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that wouldn't really be what, if we move the regional corridor up there, we could see some like logistical and distribution activity going on, some big box stores, not really the same feel as like a town center, right? So that's kind of the balancing act we have to make, the decision we have to make, right?
And maybe moving it that's the only other place we see that
I mean,
being moved?
if the idea is to capture a rail stop, this seems like the most likely place.
Okay.
That same land use category does come into play in other places as well. So that wouldn't necessarily, if you got rid of that, that wouldn't mean you don't have any of those mixed use nodes anymore. Is that what we're calling them? Mixed use centers.
Yeah.
So you can see, so here is a large mixed use center south of I-35, kind of in that same area, is also denoted to be a large mixed use center. I think that was actually directly from outcomes of conversations I think we had with you guys at one of our meetings. And then there's smaller mixed-use centers at some of these intersections through southern Schertz. There's one here and then a smaller one here. So it wouldn't be the only one. There would still be those mixed-use centers.
Okay. And then for the percentage, on the public use, how do you guys come up with that percentage? Like it's at 3% or 4%?
Yeah, so that's mostly, so the blue areas that you see right now denoted as public use, those are your existing public facilities. And so we're basically just denoting those on the map. In the future land use categories, public facilities are just an allowed use. So public facilities and parks are the 2 uses that are allowed across the board in any of these locations kind of as needed or as warranted.
Okay.
So these are just the existing public facilities.
Okay, thank you.
right, another question. Along 78, I'm thinking we should put, wait, what is it? Local corridor all along 78 instead of
Yeah.
complete neighborhood.
Yeah, I already circled it as a place to look.
You
for.
did that.
Yeah, and we agree, we've
I'm
internally kind of talked about
Glad
that
to
too.
see the dump is in development deferment. That's good.
Yep,
I would like to know one of these days what the lifespan of that thing is, but
stop throwing away things.
you never know.
That's why it's development deferment, because no one knows right now, so.
And I will say, like, so we have some time. The next step is when we next meet on this plan, we're gonna have a discussion and possible action or recommendation for action when we next meet. Doesn't mean we have to go forward with it. We could still bounce it around, but that's tentatively scheduled for the March P&Z meeting is when we're gonna start the adoption process. So we have some time in between. If you guys have any other comments or you think of anything, please email me and I will give it to the Freeze team and we can, so you don't have to think of everything right now at this moment. Yeah.
You're going away, aren't you?
I am not going on leave until April 1st, so we got some time.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, any questions for us? Are we unclear, or would you like us, can we clear something up maybe that we said, or?
So I think what we really wanted, the input from y'all was, okay, this train situation, that mixed use center in the north, we wanted to make sure that we're on the right track in terms of what y'all's opinion are. And then also, yes, I think denoting more, local collectors is, we were looking for that as well. I think we have some good direction to go forward here. And if there, in terms of the complete neighborhood, if there's any qualifiers you want to put on that, if you want to, say we need to cap the density in complete neighborhood, we want to say, only low to mid density is appropriate here, or if we want to leave it as a mixture of housing, that's up to y'all.
Yeah, that would be nice, but, as Brian explained, and I'm really bummed that I wasn't there Friday, because I'd love to hear, because we're always looking for guidance.
What was Friday?
They had a council retreat, you said, right? Yeah, and one of the things
Last Friday?
and one of the things they talked about was, but getting back to what you were saying about density caps and things, personally, I think probably not. We'll just leave that case by case as it comes in, and
Okay.
hopefully between us and city council, we'll put some guidance together to do that rather than put it in the comp plan with the rest of you. Anybody else?
I would say one thing that could be helpful if you wanted to just put additional, narrative in these descriptions, we could do that as well, just make them a little bit more clear or more descriptive. That would be fine too, so you should have this in your packet. So if you want to look through just these, 10 pages, not even 4 or 5 pages of descriptions, and let us know if there's anything specific you want to
Okay.
clarify in those.
So even outside the meeting then, what Sam is saying is if, over the next few days, if something comes to mind, or in reviewing the document, something jumps out at you, feel free to contact them and they'll pass it on to planners. Are we good? Anybody else before we move on? Okay, it is 6:38 p.m. and we're done with 5A. Okay, item 5B is PLZC 2023-0223. A lot of twos and threes in there. Hold a public hearing, consider and make a recommendation on a request to rezone approximately 26.11 acres of land from single-family residential / agricultural district to general business district, a portion of 11209 East FM 1518, generally located 600 feet northwest of the intersection of Lisa Meadows and FM 1518. parcel ID 308363, City of Schertz, Bexar County, Texas.
Good evening, Commissioners. PLZC 2023-0223, zone change of single-family residential agriculture to general business, Amaris Gomez, planner. The subject property is shown here, outlined in green. Subject property is zoned single-family residential, RA. To the north, we have right-of-way FM 1518. To the south, outside city limits, which is JBSA Randolph Air Force Base. To the east is single-family residential. To the west, single-family residential use as well. January 22nd, 2024, a total of 5 public hearing notices were sent out. We received 0 responses, and 1 sign was posted in the property at the front. UDC Section 2154 states that a zone change is required to establish the use of land and the development associated with the proposed zoning classification for the purpose of establishing and maintaining a sound, stable, and desirable development. The proposed zone change to general business GB, per the letter of intent, is requested in order to develop a commercial multi-sport complex. If the zone change is approved, the applicant will have to go through a site plan process in conformance with the UDC Section 21912 and will have to meet all of the City of Schertz UDC requirements as listed in Article 9. UDC Section 2154D, criteria for approval. Whether the proposed zoning change or zoning map amendment implements the policies of the adopted comprehensive land plan, including land use classification of the property on the future land use map. The subject property was designated as air installation compatible as part of the 2013 sector plan amendment. The city's Unified Development Code Section 2159A1 states that air installation compatibility is established to provide control on encroachment around the military airfield. There was concern about the property being directly adjacent to Joint Base San Antonio Randolph. Due to the proximity of the subject property to Randolph, staff received a formal letter of approval from JBSA stating that the base has no objection to the rezone, but does require the development to maintain a 20 to 30 foot clear zone. The 2013 sector plan is vague on the appropriate zoning and land use for air installation compatibility zone. However, in the framework implementation recommendations section, the sector plan recommends that staff analyze and make recommendations at the time of development applications for air installation compatible zone. As JBSA has approved the rezone, staff concurs with JBSA and feels that the rezone is compatible with the 2013 sector plan. Whether the proposed zoning change or zoning map amendment promotes health, safety, or general welfare of the city and safe, orderly, efficient, and healthful development of the city. As part of promoting safe, orderly, efficient, and healthful development, the city encourages that the zoning be compatible with the surrounding uses to alleviate any negative impact. FM 1518 is classified in the master thoroughfare plan as a principal arterial. At this time, TxDOT is beginning the process to widen it. The classification of the principal arterial is being realized, and the trajectory of the FM 1518 corridor is one that will see significant commercial activity. As a result, the proposed general business zoning aligns more closely with the direction that the corridor is heading. Whether the use is permitted by the proposed zone change in zoning district classification and standards applicable to such uses will be appropriate in the immediate areas of the land to be reclassified. While the adjacent properties are zoned single-family residential agriculture, the wider area of this section of 1518 has established commercial districts. Given this and the realization of FM 1518 as a principal arterial, the proposed general business zone change is consistent with the immediate area and the future development of the corridor. Whether the proposed zone change is in accord with existing or proposed plans for public schools, streets, water supply, sanitary sewers, or the public service and utilities in the area. To the best of staff's knowledge, this zone change should have minimal impact on public services to include schools, fire, police, and sanitation services. The proposed rezoning should have minimal impact on the existing water and wastewater systems. The subject property is directly adjacent to FM 1518 right-of-way. At this time, the TxDOT project to improve 1518 is underway. The project will widen 1518 into 2 travel lanes in each direction with a center median, which will be able to accommodate any additional impact that the proposed zone change will create. Whether there have been environmental and/or economic changes which warrant the requested change. Again, with 1518 being a principal arterial that is intended to accommodate larger volumes of traffic, the current TxDOT project to improve 1518 by widening into 2 lanes in each direction with a center median, causing an economical change that will ultimately benefit commercial uses in the area. Whether there is an error in the original zoning of the property for which a change is requested, there was no error in the zoning of this property. Whether all applicants' back taxes owed to the city have been paid in full, this does not impact the consideration of the Planning and Zoning Commission or the first reading from City Council. Whether the criteria are met, which at the discretion of Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council are deemed relevant and important in the consideration of the amendment. This public hearing provides a format for which the Planning and Zoning Commission can hear other potential issues and public opinion the Commission may deem relevant and important consideration to inform their recommendation to City Council during this time. Staff recommends approval of the proposed rezoning to General Business District based on the following. The proposed zone change meets all requirements set forth by the city's Unified Development Code. It is consistent with the current sector plan and is compatible with the surrounding zoning district and uses. The Planning and Engineering Department have reviewed the zone change with no objection, and JBSA has no concerns regarding the proposed rezone to General Business District. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the proposed rezoning from Single Family Residential Agricultural District, RA, to General Business District, GB.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Del Toro, are you the applicant? So you're not subject to the 3-minute limit. If you'd like to give us a presentation or talk to us.
We're here for any other questions, but we don't have a presentation.
Okay. Well, come on up. Just if your name and address for the record, please.
All right, sir. John Del Toro, Del Toro Family Partnership, 11209 East FM 1518 North, Schertz. We'd spoken with Mr. James and other members of the staff. Our daughter's playing volleyball in the city, and there was a identified need and shortfall. And really, that's kind of what we targeted. We were looking at what was going to be less intrusive in our area. And obviously, we were on 30 acres. Now we've cut it down to 20. Mr. Matt Perdue, he's our neighbor. We haven't talked in detail, but obviously we know each other. So when it comes to why we're doing it, that's really why. And then when it comes to, value add in the city, I think that's probably going to be the best thing. Right now, the girls pretty much complete all their training over on Commercial Place, older building, and the air conditioners really provide office air, but nothing in the actual facility itself. So those are really the main factors from a safety standpoint, the growth of the girls in the program. There's just a lot of value added. Any questions?
All right. Well, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so it is 6:48, and I will open the floor for public comment. Anyone? Come on up, sir. Name and address for the record, please.
Matthew Perdue for Hatchet Estates, and the address is 11207 East FM 1518. So it's a property immediately adjoining. And I just want to say I'm not opposed to the rezoning, My only concern is regarding where at the very back of the property towards Randolph, I have buildings and any construction that would be done. If there are buildings there, some kind of consideration for privacy fencing or some kind of construction about that. Otherwise, I have no objections to it at all.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Anyone else? No. All right, it is 6:49, and public input is closed. Commissioners, before we all get started here, let me again remind everyone that the issue is not Mr. Del Toro's project. It is whether or not general business is the appropriate zoning for this particular area. Because you'll remember, I don't suppose you have a permitted use, see, you guys might come prepared with, when I ask you what's permitted in general business, so you can throw it up there. But I just want to remind you that it's not about a specific project, it's about the zoning in general. So, anyone?
What did Randolph mean by a 20 to 30 foot clear zone?
So I have the letter here. So that just means free of obstruction that may be utilized to breach the top of existing fence and/or obstruct or clear sight lanes along the shared boundary lines. So I think it's more of just within like the impact of like flying operations. Height requirements, yes.
Well, it's either that or security. They just try to.
Yeah, there's a lot of trees back there, so you're gonna have to cut a 20 or 30 foot swath of trees back there. Okay.
Patrick?
Yeah, the gentleman raised a question about privacy fencing, or that would be it's already in the zoning that they have to.
That is correct. So when it comes forward for the site plan, all of that will be taken into consideration and they'll have to follow those guidelines.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we just talked about the 1518 corridor and, you know, the whole idea of what we want to do with the frontage. So, again, this is a zoning and not a project approval. It's a recommendation to City Council. If it were to be approved and rezoned, they would then go through the site planning process and you know, can you easily get to the aerial where you outline the property? Yeah, I kind of wonder more with Mr. Hatchett's property. Now he's stuck with that long, narrow piece, and what we might put in there someday. So anybody, questions, comments? If not, this is an action item. We have some options. It's a recommendation to City Council. We can recommend approval. We could recommend approval with conditions, or we can recommend denial. So if somebody would like to make a motion.
Make a motion that we repeal ZC 2023-0223 and make a motion that we approve.
All right, that's the recommend approval from Commissioner Hector. Do we have a second?
Second.
And that's Commissioner Goldick. Any further questions or discussions? Hearing and seeing none, please record your vote. All right, I see 7 votes. Would you publish a vote, please? it up here? There it goes. All right, so we have 7 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. That will be a recommendation for approval to City Council. All right, moving on to 5C, PL UDC 2023-0222. Hold a public hearing, workshop, and discussion and possible action to make a recommendation on amendments to Part 3 of the Schertz Code of Ordinances, Unified Development Code, to Article 16, definitions. Yeah.
Okay, PLUDC 2023-0222. UDC amendments to Article 16, Samuel Haas, Senior Planner. Okay, so essentially this is a pretty straightforward UDC amendment. We have a permitted use table in Article 5 that has this whole list of zoning districts and then what kind of businesses or uses you can use in that zoning district. Now the trouble is we have a ton of uses in that table that are not defined at all in our UDC. And that can get tricky because somebody could come in and say, well, I'm opening up a bookstore and if we don't have that defined, what is a bookstore? It might sound, simple and intuitive, like we just know, but there's a reason those definitions are there in Article 16 is because we don't want people abusing and opening up the interpretation to whatever they feel like. We want to keep it within what we feel like as a city, right? So staff went through the permitted use table and we looked at all the ones that didn't have a definition. And then we also found in Article 16 a few terms that weren't anywhere in the UDC. Probably got taken out at some point. They forgot about it in Article 16. So a little bit of it is cleanup too. And then there's 2 additions there's 1 revision and 1 addition from engineering. We're calling the Public Works Design Guide. We're changing the name to Public Works Specification Manual, so we're adding that in there. And they also had a little revision for alleys. So I'll kind of touch in on that a little bit. But essentially we're doing 23 additions, 8 removals, and 1 revision. So I gave you this list of what we're adding. And if you want to go through any of this, we can. I didn't want to kind of get super and read out all of it all at once. There was a packet sent to you. If you have any issues with any of these, we could talk about them. But here's the list here: adult media, bakery, bookstore, department store, florist, furniture sales, gated communities, etc. Home improvement center, microbrewery. So there's quite a lot. And there's some of these businesses already exist in Schertz and we just don't have it defined, right? And then we're removing these 8 here. Some of them are already defined in other areas, like there's some overlap. For instance, like retail food store, shopping center, we just call that a retail store now. And it's a more of a broad category of what kind of, just things you go to a store, you buy, you leave, right? You don't have to really get down into retail food store, variety store. We don't get that granular anymore. The revision comes from alley. And you can see that in the previous alley, the sheet that I gave you, they specifically authorized in garden homes. Well, I mean, that seems a little too specific. An alley could be just about anywhere. So engineering wanted to make this change and just say a means of vehicular access to abutting property and which is used primarily for vehicle traffic to the rear side of properties which otherwise abut on a street. Pretty simple and straightforward. Like a zone change, in the UDC, we have a criteria for approval for UDC amendments. So I'm going to read these off to you. I know we all love hearing these. So the proposed amendment promotes the health, safety, and general welfare of the city and the safe, orderly, efficient, and healthful development of the city. The UDC functions better when there's continuity throughout the code. If it's going to be in Article 5, it needs to be defined in Article 16. So not properly defining those uses does open the door for interpretation and creates potential for inconsistency. We want to control that. Number 2, an amendment to the text is consistent with other policies of the UDC and the city. The main purpose of these amendments is to provide consistency. We want the UDC to be consistent. Number 3, any proposed amendment is consistent with the goals and objectives in this UDC and the city. And I'll point your attention to the city's strategic plan, and there's a subsection in there called operation values. So in those operation values, we want to be proactive in changing our policies. And proactive means initiating change by anticipating future situations in order to make things happen, continuously improving and evolving, be forward thinking, and the ability to forecast and meet the needs before the customer identifies them. And so basically by providing these definitions, we're helping applicants as well be more clear with what the UDC is trying to convey. And the last criteria is for you all to decide, if there's any criteria which at the discretion of the Planning and Zoning Commission deems relevant. So these amendments would provide consistency in the UDC between Article 5 and 16. They would also help clarify the UDC and make it a little bit easier to use, also decluttering a little bit in Article 16. Staff recommends approval of the amendments to the Unified Development Codes as proposed and discussed.
All right, thank you, Sam. This is a public hearing. It is 7 p.m. and I will open the floor for public comment. Yeah, unless the chairs can talk. All right, so it is still 7 p.m. and I will close public input and we'll talk about it. Commissioners.
I looked through it, I didn't see anything that jumped out as being, oh, wait, that's wrong.
Yeah, I did as well. Just had a question. So I saw boarding house was taken off. Was there something else that you all believed was closely related?
Yeah, I think we have a definition there like convalescent home or family home. That covers the same definition as boarding house, essentially.
So bed and breakfast, group home.
Yeah, the boarding house, I'll kind of, let's see what it's scratched off here.
And I only ask because I know that group homes to assist in taking care of the elderly are becoming more and more popular. Some of the comments that I read through that were responses from people in the community was this idea of having some place where they could go to once they could no longer stay in their homes, but they could stay in the community. And that's one of the things as I've been looking over this map and reading through to figure out where could that be. I mean, I know they have several down off of, a couple down off of 3009, but
yeah, group home is defined in the UDC and is permitted in several of our zoning districts. If the convalescent home, it's very specific, and also it's not anywhere in our permitted use table. So we don't have it in the permitted use table, so the definition isn't really necessary. That's kind of the motivation for taking it out. But we do have group home in our permitted use table.
thank you.
Do we have something like long-term care facility?
We do.
Okay.
So the one, Sam, the one I zeroed in on is a bakery. A retail establishment for preparing, cooking, baking, and selling products on the premises. It doesn't say, well, I guess maybe the and, because I'm thinking, well, a restaurant prepares and cooks. It just, maybe it is anyway. Definitions are always, you never get them right, okay? And a really fun exercise sometimes is going into the fire code and trying to differentiate between a boarding house, a group home. They're all in there, and well, if you have more than 6 or you have less than, I had a lot of fun with that one, so. All right, so, anybody else?
Oh, of course.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe you were sleeping or something. No. All right, go ahead. Let us have it.
On the department store, why do we have a single owner's name? Is that something legal or Can I have two?
Yeah, I think that it was meant to serve as like a, yeah, like a Sears, or, I mean, Sears ain't even around anymore, but like, you know.
Barnes and Noble?
Yeah, Dillard's, or, just, you know, something along those lines.
So is
We could change that wording, though, if it's confusing.
I don't have a suggested term, but that just, I don't know, it made me ask the question, what do you mean by a single owner? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it falls under like one LLC or incorporated business, like one business owner
Sure.
type thing.
Okay. I can buy that. Pet store, what's an exotic animal?
Oh,
I don't think it is. Do we have a sub-definition of an exotic animal?
we do not, but I guess we could put one in there if you'd like to see it.
You're gonna
But
get.
I don't know how to define.
I know,
who's.
you're gonna get into a fight, I guarantee somebody's gonna fight you on this. Excluding exotic animals, well, you know, I've been raising tigers for 50 years, I don't think they're exotic, they're family pets.
Oh, really?
Sure. So prove me wrong.
I wouldn't have pegged you for that.
Again, I don't have a solution, but I'm just saying that when we exclude exotic animals, then you need to subdefine what is an exotic animal.
I think that's fair. I think I could attempt to elaborate on that.
Okay. Under pharmacy, over at CVS, they have a doctor's office in there now. Is that included? That's not included.
Under which one?
Pharmacy. CVS has a doctor's office in there, and I suppose the other one, what's the other one? Walgreens, I suppose they have a doctor's office in there too.
So so in terms of the pharmacy, we could elaborate on that definition and include.
Well, I would say it's a good question, Richard, but if we look at CVS or Walgreens today, and Walgreens doesn't have a doctor yet, but today, where would those be? What would we call those in the permitted use table?
Just a medical office.
Well, here's where I'm going. Okay, I believe if you go up in the medical complex at the top of Schertz Parkway, there is a standalone pharmacy, and that's their primary thing. They dispense medications. Now, I've never been in there, so they may have incidentals. Unlike Walgreens or CVS, where you go in there and it's a pharmacy. Yes, if you go way in the back, there's the pharmacy, but the rest of the store is all about food and beverage and toys and stationery.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So when we would look at a Walgreens, we would say the uses that are occurring within this business are medical office, pharmacy, retail. All those are permitted in, say, general business, right? So it would still be, it would fall under the category, you know, under each category, essentially. So we don't have to include doctor per se in pharmacy unless we're envisioning a specific pharmacy store like they used to have, you know, that would sell like soda and stuff. But I'm not sure that that's what you're getting at. Am I correct?
Well, you see where I'm coming from, Richard? So, yeah.
Well.
So would we call CVS a pharmacy, or would we call it a retail?
CVS calls itself a pharmacy.
I know they do.
We would define it as several different uses because that's everything that's going on the property.
Mixed use.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I found a mixed use.
Yeah. CVS is our mixed use.
Well, I guess you could say the same about HEB. I think where does the money, majority of the money for that business derives from? And if you look at the vast majority of the money that's derived from CVS and Walgreens, it's from the pharmaceuticals. So I would say if the vast majority of the money is derived from the pharmaceutical sales, then I would say it's considered a pharmacy. Side note, pharmacists also do other things. They don't just dispense medications. They do immunizations as well. And so pharmacists are being trained to do a lot of other things as well. And so some of these businesses are being more diverse to bring in more clientele to make more money. That's why they do that. So I don't know if I'm specifying this because the field in and of itself is growing. And so if we
Right.
tie ourselves into a box by listing too many things, we may not have the flexibility in the future.
Well, the pharmacy is the intended purpose, the intended use. All the retail is just a byproduct of, if I'm coming in for medication, I might as well grab a loaf of bread or whatever. Greeting cards, and that's just, so.
So, yeah, I mean, I feel like we're getting, a little in the weeds here, but like, it seemed, so if a standalone business came on and said, we are just a pharmacy, we're not selling anything else. We have defined that now, okay? And it is in our permitted use table, so we have to define it, right? Now, if they say, we're gonna have a small doctor's office, and we're also gonna sell some food products here and there, those are also in our permitted use table and also defined. And if that one business has those three uses, and all three of those uses are allowed in, say, general business district, then we would move forward with that proposal. Yeah.
Okay. How about on the truck terminal? Do we need to say that we would allow or not allow overnight parking at a truck terminal?
So I would say that we are defining it to allow it. The specific, qualifier as overnight is not in there, but facilities engaged in fueling, servicing, repair, washing, and or parking of trucks, we don't have a time category for anything else in, we don't say hotels, you have to have an overnight stay or something, right? So they're allowed to park there. It's up to them to how long they want to.
Okay. So you thought about it.
The truck terminal, we thought a lot about, actually.
And one last one on the railroad bus station terminal.
Uh-huh.
Do we need to specifically state if they want to have a restaurant in there that they can sell food?
So again, I think that would fall under what we just talked about with like Walgreens. If in the same zoning district, a restaurant is permitted and just so happens that there's a rail stop there too, then they're both permitted in the same zoning district, so we would allow it, yeah.
All right.
Well, to piggyback on Commissioner Bro's, looking at the truck terminal, such premises may include retail stores. So because HEB has loading docks, does that now become a truck terminal?
So it spreads the net wide, but it doesn't necessarily preclude, like you have to have a retail store in order to be a truck terminal. Like, no, you can be a truck terminal and only do unloading and loading of freight. But if you were like a Flying J or a Travel America or something and had a retail store and, facilities for the truckers, then that's something that happens to. And this was specifically something that the city attorney wanted us to include because he didn't want to narrow the definition too much. Because initially we thought just the shipment and unloading of stuff, but the city attorney thought that given kind of the trend of a lot of freight facilities that to include some of these other provisions in there, so we're not limiting what could potentially be coming to Schertz.
Okay, Glenn's Mine, truck terminal.
Yeah.
Southeast Freightways.
Yep.
FedEx, FedEx Freight. Those are truck terminals.
Sure.
The new QT up on Schwab Road, it happens to have short-term truck parking. It's not a truck terminal. It's a service station. It's a fueling station. It's not a truck terminal.
Right.
HEB has 2 or 3 loading ramps in the back where it is not a truck terminal. It's a grocery store. So I don't
I think the key difference is the primary function of motor freight shipment and shipment point. So that's not HEB, that's not QT, that's not.
Well, then why include retail stores? Okay,
Can't the retail be, say they need wipers for their truck, or they need,
Correct.
boxes, I don't know, things that for
Yeah,
the
the-
truck itself.
The trucker needs supplies, needs a Slim Jim and a Coke,
Correct, yeah.
stuff like that.
That's what we were trying to capture.
Yeah.
You know, if you're unloading and loading freight, it might take a while. The trucker might need to use the restroom or buy a honey bun or something.
But he's not loading and unloading freight at the QT at Schwab Road and 35.
And we define that as a gas station with fuel pumps.
Okay, so
Yeah.
why do we want to lump all those things into truck terminal? You know,
We don't, I think the idea
See
is
what you started?
we don't want to limit if we don't provide that, then we have a truck terminal that comes in and if they're offering those services, are we going to go in there and shut them down? You know, I think the logical thing is, you know, we don't want to limit entirely what this terminal might be, what this development might become.
Do we have one in Schertz right now?
We do not.
I didn't think so.
What do you mean?
Yeah. So we just approved a Cisco truck terminal SUP because it had fuel pumps, right?
We approved it or disapproved?
Oh, no, it's in the permitted use table.
We approved the Cisco one.
Yeah. But the trouble with that is that we did not have a definition for truck terminal. And so that left it open to interpretation, right? So we had to figure out what a truck terminal was. And now here we are saying this is what it is. So now we have clear direction in the future.
Well, I would argue it's everything up to such premises. Everything before that's a truck terminal, okay? And I don't understand where the city attorney's coming from, why he feels it's necessary to, some things to me are just obvious.
Yeah.
And here, this is what I said at the beginning, when you start trying to define things, you get on, you can, trust me, you want a fun one, try defining a fire lane and no parking. Well, there's, you know, then you go to the transportation code, there's no parking, no standing, no stopping, and which is included in what, and that's kind of where I think we're, you know, to me, you ask me what a truck terminal is, I can tell you. I think you went a little too far here, but that's.
I think a truck terminal too is a place that I wouldn't go. It's not I'll go to Quick Trip, so will a trucker, but I'm not going to go to a truck terminal.
Yeah, I think a truck terminal is intended for a specific use, which is to load and unload their product, wash and service a truck. And the retail is just, like you said, they either need wiper blades, they want a honey bun, it's not like somewhere the public will go and visit. Let me go to the truck terminal to grab a honey bun. No, that's specific for those that are using it for the purpose of the terminal itself, for their truck, my opinion.
Welcome to capitalism.
Yeah.
Okay? My only question is there any language in here that precludes it from being used for a truck terminal or to pick up something real quick?
Like in the, like it has to have both, or?
I don't think anything has to have both, right?
Right.
It's just giving you the option.
Yeah, and so the primary function is the unloading and loading of freight, but such premises may include the XYZ.
I love it.
So, yeah.
Okay, I surrender.
Let's all go get honey buns.
You started it.
Change is happening.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have to understand, I spent 20-plus years of my life interpreting definitions. You know, the fire and the building code are full of them, and you're always, yeah, so. And I was serious about the fire lane. I, for years, tried to write an ordinance, and you could just never come up with the right words, that somebody couldn't weasel over this way, anyway. All right, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right, so once again, this is an action item for us to make a recommendation. Well, actually, it's possible action. You know, we could ask staff if we really have some hangups to redo these. I don't think we're there. I don't think we need to ask them to change it and come back, do we? So then again, we've got the same three options. We can recommend approval with conditions, or denial.
I
So,
recommend approval, PL UDC 20230222.
all right, I have a motion to recommend approval.
Second.
And that was quick. Okay, way down there on the end, Carbone. So I have a motion and a second to recommend approval. Richard, did you
I
have
think
something?
Mr. Haas said he's going to look into exotic animals, right? You're going to look into exotic animals?
My idea is to see what, from a legal standpoint, what the law says is like, you can't have XYZ in this country, and include that in the definition.
Would be good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm not going to tell him what it is.
Anybody else? All right. So again, we're recommending approval to City Council. And if there's no further discussion, would you record? Well, see, somebody's way ahead of me already. Record your vote, please. All right, I have 7 votes. If you publish that, please. All right, I have 7 ayes, none opposed. That motion passes. All right, and it's 7:20, okay. All righty, item 6, requests and announcements. Request by commissioners to place items on a future planning and zoning agenda. Anybody? Nothing? Oh. All right, 6B, announcements by commissioners. Anybody? Announcements by city staff.
I've got some announcements.
Cool.
So I've got 3 announcements here. The first one is a site plan that was approved for the, can you see it?
Here it is.
There it is.
All right.
So, Saddlebrook Unit 1 lift station. This is the Unit 1A lift station that they're building prior to the Saddlebrook subdivision. This is the Parklands Unit 3B. This is a 12-acre portion of the Parkland subdivision for 57 lots. And we have Eckerd Road Retail. This is approximately 8.7 acres. It is a commercial property with 4 lots. All I got.
All right, thank you. Item 7 is information that's in our packets about current project and where they stand with city council. And before we leave, little birdie just said something about Sam having a new baby. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Is this
It's a boy. His name is Conrad.
cool? First one?
Yep.
Yeah.
First son, firstborn. He carries on the name.
Welcome
Yeah.
to the club.
The kingdom lives on.
Oh, Mom? Oh.
Yep. Right.
All right, item 8, there be no further business for this meeting's adjourned at 7:22.